Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Remote No Pressure Podcast. We're so excited that you decided to join us for another episode, another week, and this episode will not let you down. Now, very excited to be here because we are in our new studio, our new house that we have in the middle of a cornfield somewhere in the Midwest. It's very exciting, I know. But my wife and I and my kids, we're kind of living in a country song now. It's kind of crazy. We literally have a cornfield outside of our window, so we watch our corn grow up in rows, and then we have random tractors that create traffic jams, John Deere's, Internationals, Harvesters, things like that. It's crazy. It's really crazy. And then we've got the egg farm down the road that creates a unique, pungent smell when you drive by. A lot of fun. But it's a great place. We're super excited to be here. I'm very excited that the internet was up and at 'em today because I did not know if that would happen, and it happened late Friday night. Thank you to my cable company who came out at like 8 o'clock at night, Friday night. And yes, March Madness was on, I believe. And they helped us get it connected. So super thanks to them. This week's episode I'm very excited about. We have Rabbi Eric Eisenkramer on the phone with us on the horn, and he actually wrote a book called Fly Fishing, the Sacred Art, Casting a Fly as a Spiritual Practice. And one of the things that we talk about a lot about on this podcast is not just, what flies or what hatch, but really the philosophy, what it does for your soul, what it does for your heart. And we really believe that fly fishing has the power to change the world. We really do. And that's what keeps us coming every week. So this week, without exception, we have another excellent guest, Rabbi Eric Eisenkramer. Welcome to the podcast. Let's light the fire. Today on the Remote No Pressure Podcast, we have Rabbi Eric Eisenkramer with us. Thank you very much for spending some time with us, Rabbi.
Jeff, thank you so much for having me.
Well, the reason I reached out to you was because of your book. One of the things that we really believe here on the Remote No Pressure Podcast is that fly fishing is a religious experience. And your book was actually called Fly Fishing, the Sacred Art, Casting a Fly as a Spiritual Practice. Can you tell us a little bit about how that book was birthed?
Absolutely. So I had the great pleasure of connecting with another clergy member. His name is Reverend Michael Attas. And by the way, there are no sermons in this book. I do agree with you that fly fishing can be a spiritual experience. And my time out on the water has taught me that. When you're standing in the middle of the stream and you feel the bite of the cold water on the waders, and you feel the breeze, and you look around and see the beautiful trees, and maybe you're God willing, you're out west and you see the mountains, and you have this sense of connection. You feel connected to nature. You feel connected to yourself. You may even feel connected to a presence larger than yourself. And so the longer that I've been out on the water, the more I felt that sense of spirituality, and I wanted to explore it further. So I decided to write about it, and was fortunate to be able to publish this book, Fly Fishing, the Sacred Art.
Well, that's great. Now, Rabbi, let's start out. You're a young man in St. Louis. Were you in the Creve Coeur area, or what part of St. Louis were you in?
Oh, you know you're St. Louis. I'm impressed.
Yes, I do. I lived in St. Louis, actually, so at one time. But I was just curious, what part of St. Louis were you living in?
Well, I lived in Olivet, which is not too far from Creve Coeur, and I grew up there, and all my family is there, and went to high school there, and really enjoyed it. Gateway to the West and the St. Louis Arch, and toasted ravioli. All the St. Louis people will know what that's all about.
Yeah, and Provel cheese. Provel cheese.
Oh, Provel cheese, which is located nowhere else in the country. It's a mixture, I think, of American and provolone. It's very good and very unique.
It is very unique. I'll give you that. So you're a young man in St. Louis, and you see a movie. What was the movie, and how did that influence you?
Well, I saw the movie,
right?
Which
the movie,
you're of course aware of, which was A River Runs Through It. So growing up, I used to fish the Bass Lakes with my dad outside of St. Louis. We would, get up early in the morning, and we would drive out, before dawn, and we'd get out on the lakes, and I'd have the traditional bobber, half red, half white, and the night crawler, and did that for years, and always loved being out on the water. And then I went and saw the movie A River Runs Through It, and like everyone else, like millions of other people, I was captivated by the Montana scenery, by the grace of the casting, and I said, I've got to try this. I was hooked. So I went to the local fly fishing store there in St. Louis, and I bought my first rod, which was a St. Croix 9 feet 5 weight, and decided to start to teach myself how to cast.
And you still use that rod to this day, am I right, Eric?
I wish that rod served me so well. I think that rod served me at least 15 years,
Wow.
and it was an amazing rod. And then finally, it had served its time. But it made it around the world to a couple trips out west and down to Argentina. And so I have some additional rods now. But it was a special one.
Oh wow, that first ride is always a special one. It seems like even if it's not $1,000 rod, it's that something about that.
Absolutely. Well, when I was first trying to figure out how to cast the fly rod, I would go to a local lake and put on a bass popper,
Mm.
and just haul it out there, catch a couple fish, and then obviously I graduated onto the trout streams, and that's where I've been ever since.
That's great. Forgive me for my ignorance, Rabbi, but how does one become a rabbi? What is that journey like?
Well, I'm a clergy member. I'm a rabbi of a congregation. I have a congregation here in East Brunswick, New Jersey, and I went to college for 4 years, undergraduate school, and then I decided that I wanted to be a rabbi and serve the Jewish people. So I applied to rabbinical school and was accepted. I lived in Israel for a year, and then returned and spent another 4 years studying in New York City. And I was fortunate enough to be ordained as a rabbi, and I've been serving congregations now for about a decade and a half.
So you do your undergraduate, you do the rabbi school, and then it's like a residency. The 4 years there in New York City, it's like an internship thing, and then they decide if you should be a rabbi or not, or.
No, I had some student congregations where I worked with other rabbis, and I learned, how to be a rabbi and how to give sermons and how to help people and how to teach classes and all sorts of different skills. And it's a very rewarding path. I'm sure that a lot of ministers and pastors and priests feel that as well. You are able to be there with people at some of the most amazing times in their lives and times of great celebration. And you're with them at very difficult times and guiding them when they lose loved ones or they face personal crises. And it's my feeling that the more I can help people, the more good we can hopefully add to the world.
How has fishing influenced you as a rabbi? I know you've touched on it earlier, but is there anything in particular that you can point to say, I was on the river and I had this crazy experience? Is there anything in particular that you've had, any stories from the river that has affected you as a rabbi?
The concept of the Sabbath, which of course is prevalent in both Judaism and Christianity, the day of rest is very important. In Judaism we celebrate the Sabbath from Friday evening to Saturday evening, and in Christianity it's celebrated on Sunday. And the Sabbath is meant to be a day of rest, a day of separation from the regular world, a day to recharge. So I actually feel I have, very often, I have two Sabbaths. I have the Sabbath in my congregation where I'm leading services and being with my congregation and praying. And then I have my Sabbath when I'm on the fly on the river. And that is on Thursdays, which is my day off from the temple. So when I leave my home and drive out to the river on those Thursdays, and I spend some time listening to the radio and decompressing a bit, and you get out to the river and you set up your gear and walk out to the stream, and then you get on the water. And to me, this is actually one of the most important things about fly fishing is I turn off my cell phone. No beeps, no text messages, no emails, just me and the water and the fish and nature. And you just soak it in, the entire experience. And maybe you're fortunate. And maybe I'm fortunate I'm able to catch a trout and hold this beautiful creature in my hand and look at it and release it back to its home. And at the end of a day of fishing, whether I've caught a number of fish or I've caught zero fish, I feel a sense of contentment, a sense of peace, and I feel recharged.
Living in New York City, the hustle and bustle, the stress of life, and I'm sure that you've experienced it in your congregation. People who are so fast paced, just go 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 all the time that they never take that Sabbath. Why do you think we as a society are so hesitant for that self care to take that Sabbath?
It's so vital. You put it exactly correctly. Self-care. We have to make some time for ourselves to recharge. We're not machines. We're not robots. We're human beings. We're flesh and blood, and we need our time to rest and recover. I actually live about an hour outside of New York City, but it is very hectic here too. I can assure you of that. And being a clergy member and wishing to help people and leading a congregation, I'm always hearing from people and trying to assist them and help them with whatever issues they're dealing with. So having the opportunity to really decompress is just of vital importance. I think it's very easy, especially with some of the technology that we have, and I'm a tremendous supporter of technology. I love my email and my text messages and my phone and everything, but we've gotten used to being on at all times, and we really need to be able to disconnect, to unplug, and to be restored. And for me, of course, prayer is a part of that ability to be restored, but so is fly fishing, and so is being out in the beautiful world.
It's so important that God created a command for it to take a Sabbath.
We need it, right? It's one of the Big Ten. It's right there. You can't miss it. It's number 4.
Yeah, and that just shows how important it is. Now, as you counsel people within your congregation, there, and you counsel people who may be struggling with stress or anxiety, and what percentage of those would you say are related to not resting enough?
I think that's a major facet of life, especially with children today. I see this. Many of our children are so overprogrammed. They go to school. They're academically, and I feel that school has become more rigorous in the last years. Although maybe that's just me looking back. You never know. But they're under a lot of pressure in school. And then a lot of children have a lot of activities they go to after school, whether it be, dance or sports or all sorts of things. And those are wonderful opportunities for children to grow and to be nurtured and to learn. But, children especially need time to be able to recover. And they need time to explore and be outside. My children are young. I have twins that are 7. I have a boy and a girl. And so we're just starting to get into the fly fishing now, but I'm definitely going to encourage them to make sure they find their own way to recover, whatever that may be, whether it's time on the stream or just unstructured time to be outdoors and to appreciate that.
Yeah, that's great, and it's funny because the kids are so involved, but the parents are taking them all over the place. They're driving them to the baseball practice or. And like you said, that's all great opportunities, but sometimes it seems like as a society, we can just really get caught up in going, and never just stopping to relax. Have you ever suggested fly fishing to a congregant who may have been going through a stressful time?
I have on occasion, but what's really interesting to me is, people reach out to me who have a love of fly fishing and find it to be very restorative. And I hear from people all the time. There's a gentleman, a veteran who reached out to me, happens to be from St. Louis recently, who has had some issues that he's dealing with, and he has just found the time on the stream to be very healing for him. There are just a number of people who have, as Thoreau said, we some men fish all their lives and realize it's not fish that they're after. And I think that's one of the most brilliant quotes about fly fishing. I love that one. And, when we realize that, it's the process, it's the time we spend out on the water that is so important and vital for us, and not just the results. And, even just being out there and just the motion of the casting is so relaxing. When you're casting, it's very hard to think about anything else because it's so involved, it's so rhythmic, it's so relaxing, and that's a beautiful part of the experience.
There's a quote that if it says that you had said, if you believe that the world has a divine source, you have an obligation to protect it and care for it. Can you talk to us a little bit about that quote?
Chris Wood, the CEO of Trout Unlimited, we were very fortunate to have him write the foreword to the book. And I'm a tremendous supporter of Trout Unlimited and every organization that looks to protect trout streams and the larger planet that we live on. Conservation, I think, is a vital part of the fly fishing experience. When you're out there and you experience what it's like to be on the water, you want those streams to be there for your children and grandchildren. And the only way to make that happen is for us all to take action to ensure that. Whether it be the simple things like, cleaning up the streams, restoring the streams, getting involved in TU and finding ways, on a larger scale to make a difference. These are all very important ways to ensure the future of fly fishing and our planet. And as that quote mentioned, if we believe that the world has a divine source, we are stewards of that world. And it's our responsibility to ensure that it is protected and cared for.
Yeah, that's a great point on all fronts. If you don't mind me asking just a few other questions here. So you're in East Brunswick, New Jersey, right? And so
yes.
What would you call your home waters? Where's your stream that your go-to?
So I like to fish, I try to fish as many rivers as I can. I actually used to live in Connecticut before I came to East Brunswick, so I would fish the Housatonic, the Housay, and the Farmington, which are both great streams up there. Here in New Jersey, of course, I fish Roscoe, New York, and the Upper Delaware. That is the birthplace of fly fishing in America. And it's really very neat. The Beaverkill River there, which is one of the main streams near Roscoe and in the Catskills area there, every pool has a sign by it, talking a little bit about the person who fished there or the name of the pool and its history. And it's really very special to be at those spots where anglers have been fishing for over 100 years. I will tell you those are some very hard streams to fish on. They are well fished, and it's not like out west where there are trout everywhere. The streams are more narrow, and it's definitely more of a challenge. But just knowing that you're part of that history and being in those waters, and the Catskill Mountains are beautiful with all the trees around them, especially in the fall. It's a very special place to be.
Why do you think fly fishing is such a romantic sport? I mean, I don't talk to a lot of bass fishermen who would express the same sentiment. I went to this, maybe because bass fishing with regular spinning gear is not as old, but it just seems like there's a real romantic. What do you think it is about fly fishing that there's just so much appreciation for history?
Well, I guess it begins with the Complete Angler. That book is over 300 years old, if I'm remembering correctly. And so there's been, and I read at one point, I think, that the Romans were the first to try fishing with a fly without a live bait. So, there's a long history of fishing in this way. But for me, at least, it just comes down to really being in the water. You're standing in the stream and you're feeling the current going over you, and you just feel very connected to everything around you. And I think that the water, for me, the water kind of washes away all my concerns downstream and just helps me be at one with myself and with all that is around me. So it's a beautiful and soothing and calming way to live. And in Hebrew there is a term shalom, which means peace, but that term also comes from a root that means wholeness. So that's the feeling that I get out on the stream, is this feeling of wholeness and connection.
Let's talk about Israel. How long did you live there? You said a year?
I did live there for a year, and believe it or not, there is a little bit of fly fishing in Israel.
Tell us about it.
Yes, so when I was living there, I did not, unfortunately, have the opportunity to fish there. There's a lot of fishing on the Red Sea and on the Mediterranean. You go out in the boats, and you can also fish on shore. But there's just a little bit of fly fishing, and there's a gentleman you can Google him. His name is Italo Lebignan, and he lives in Canada and has a television program. I think it's called Canadian Sport Fishing. So he went to Israel for 10 days and filmed himself fishing for all sorts of different fish, and he's a very skilled angler. And he went up to the northern part of Israel. There's a stream there called Dan, D-A-N, and it actually flows into the Jordan River. And it's kind of up in the mountains, and it's a cold water stream. And there are some trout hatcheries up there that Israel raises some rainbow trout there in that area. And some of the rainbow trout escaped from the hatcheries and are in this tiny little mountain stream. So Italo was able to catch himself a rainbow trout in Israel, which is pretty amazing, I thought.
That is pretty amazing. What was it like living as, studying to be a rabbi? Not really fly fishing related, but what was it like living in Israel and studying there?
It was an amazing experience. I lived in Jerusalem for a year, a calendar year, and I had the opportunity to really explore the entire country. Israel is about the size of New Jersey, but it's one of the most diverse geographic countries, I think. In the north, there's a mountain called Mount Hermon, which sometimes gets snow. We tend to think of Israel as an arid climate, but there is green areas in the north of Israel. There's the Mediterranean Sea is one of the most beautiful bodies of water. And when you go to the beach in Tel Aviv, it's such an amazing place. And there was a little restaurant we used to like to go to right on the beach, which made the best chocolate milkshake I've ever had in my life. What can I tell you? And we'd go to the beach and get our chocolate milkshakes, and we'd be happy as a clam. And then you go. Of course, you got the incredible history of Jerusalem, the old city, seeing the history. You literally walk down, and as you walk down, you're going into earlier layers of history there. And then you go down to the Dead Sea. You float in the Dead Sea. You're not going to catch a lot of fish there, for obvious reasons. And then you can go down to the south of Israel, and there's a city called Eilat, which is right on the Red Sea. And Eilat is kind of a resort town down there. And I remember we swam with the dolphins down there. And we had a beautiful coral reef, and we were snorkeling and seeing these incredibly beautiful fish that we did not catch and left alone. But it was really it's a remarkable country, and as a rabbi, it's obviously very fulfilling spiritually to be in the Jewish homeland.
Yeah, that I can imagine. So we talked earlier about trotting the trails of ancient fly fishermen, and you're just going to take it a bit further and trot the trails of ancient rabbis. So that had to be a similar experience, or probably even a more deep experience, I can imagine, living there in Israel and studying to be a rabbi.
It's you read the Bible and you read the narratives in the Bible and the stories, and they have incredible meaning and power. But when you're standing in the place where they happened, it's a very meaningful experience. I remember in Israel they have archaeological sites that are known as tells. And a tell is basically a hill that's built up where they would build a city, and then the city would get conquered and destroyed, and then they would build another city on top of it. And then that would get destroyed. And so each successive layer would build the tell higher, became a hill. So one time I was out at one of these tells, and you're seeing the ruins and you're learning about the history, and I found a piece of pottery. And, who knows how old this piece of pottery was? Maybe it was 1,000 years old. Maybe it was 1,500 years old. And I just picked it right up off the ground. I don't think I was breaking any archaeological laws as far as I know. And, and I took it home, and I just, I'm looking at this piece of pottery and thinking about how my ancestors 1,500 years ago made a pot, and they were living here. And now here I am in the same place holding a shard, a memory from that.
Wow, like whose hands touched this at one time and molded this way?
And I became you become kind of an archaeology buff when you're over there, and learning about the different history. And by the way, as I'm sure you know, Israel has a shared history. It's not just a Jewish history. There's a Christian history, and many religions trace their history back to Israel. And you become kind of an archaeology buff, and I purchased a few coins that had ancient Hebrew writing on them, and those were incredible because I read Hebrew as part of being a rabbi, and I'm looking at a 2,000-year-old Jewish coin made around by the time of the Romans, and reading the letters, the same letters that I read today, and thinking about where that coin came from. And I purchased a little lamp that you would. The way they had their light was they would put olive oil in a little bowl and put a little wick, and they would light the wick. So I purchased a little wick and a little bowl, and that bowl was supposedly from the time of Abraham, who was the first Jew. So in my mind, I'm thinking if Abraham had to have a little light, this is what he would have used.
Who knows? Maybe Abraham walked by it or owned it. Who knows?
You never know. It could also be that the guy who sold it to me made it on his little thing and baked it and got a good deal. You never know.
Yeah, it's 2,000 years old. Sure,
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, cool. Well, can you share with us a time on the water what's your most memorable fly fishing experience?
I would say it's probably in Argentina. So my wife's family is from Argentina, and we went down there 6 or so years ago. My twins at the time were about 9 months old, and taking 2 9-month-olds on a 24 hours of traveling was an adventure. Let me tell you something.
That's very brave of you.
Thank you. So we go down there. We're having a great trip, and I got a 3-day furlough to go fishing. So we were near a city called Cordoba in Argentina. So we weren't down in Patagonia, which of course is where the world famous fly fishing is.
Right.
But I managed to connect with a guide. His name is Lucas, and Lucas spoke Spanish and some English, and I spoke English, and I'm Jewish and he's Christian, but it turned out that once we started fishing, it was amazing, of course, how much we had in common because we both have a love for the river, for the streams. So, he took me to this first river. It's called the Rio San Jose. And Argentina is known for its beef industry and its ranches. So, we walked through a ranch and had to avoid a lot of cow pies, let me tell you something. And so we get to this beautiful river, and there's a sign there in Spanish, and it says Cordoba Trucha Club, the Cordoba Trout Club.
Wow.
And, it was amazing to think, here in Cordoba, they care about the rivers just like we do. Mm-hmm. It was pretty remarkable. So we fished there and had a wonderful time. And then we went to another river called the Rio Quines. And, we're fishing, and it was like a lot of gorges. And he kind of had me fishing all the way down. So I'm pointing my line straight up in the air and casting it down, which is really neat. And so we were fishing for a day or two and catching a few fish, and we're having a good time. And we kind of get to the last day, and I'm tired, and it's about noon or so, I'm ready to go home. And we see a pool, and Lucas says, "Why don't you, take your black woolly bugger and cast it in the pool?" So I do, and it goes, sinks, of course, and goes under. And next thing I know, it just stops. The line just stops, and it feels like there's a safe on the end of the line.
Wow.
So it was amazing. So he's yelling at me, don't pull it too hard, keep your tension, and I'm trying not to fall off into the water, and we're both, flipping out here, so this goes on for 3 or 4 minutes or something. And finally, we get the fish to the net, and it's a 5-pound, 22-inch rainbow trout.
Wow.
Which was, the biggest fish I caught by about twice. And, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Is that the picture that you sent us?
That is the picture I sent
Awesome.
you, yes. And, and I got this big grin on my face from ear to ear, I'm very excited about it. And so we get the requisite picture, and then I release the trout back into the water and let him go free again. And so then we finish that, and we're sitting on the rock, and we're having some tuna fish sandwiches, and we're talking about what happened. And, we were just 2 trout bums on a rock reflecting on having a great day on the river.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Rabbi, for spending some time with us. If someone wanted to purchase your book or find you online, how would they do that?
Well, I have a blog as well, which I'd love people to come see. That's called The Fly Fishing Rabbi. You can just Google that. And the book is The Fly Fishing, the Sacred Art. And you can Google that. That's available at Amazon. I'd also, can I tell you one more story, Jeff, while I got you on the line?
Absolutely. That'd be great.
Yeah, you could put it in somewhere else in the interview.
Oh, that's okay. No, go ahead. Go for it.
So one of the most special experiences I had fly fishing was going out to Missoula, Montana. And I was hired to officiate at a wedding in Glacier National Park out there. And sometimes it's rough to be a rabbi, you have to understand. So I fly out to Missoula, and I meet the Jewish congregation there, and I'm able to fish some of the storied rivers of that area, the rivers that were in a river runs through it, of course. I fished the Big Blackfoot, and I floated that river for a day. And I was just amazed by how, the beautiful water, how wide open it was, the big blue sky, on the Northeast, I'm always fishing the roll cast here. Out there, you really luxuriate in a full cast out there. And I caught my first cutthroat out there, which was really special, seeing with the orange band under the gills. And so we fished the Blackfoot and a few other streams out there. And then on my last day, I decided to go to a different place. So I went to a small church located in Missoula, which was the church where Reverend McLean served.
Wow.
And it was beautiful church there right in the middle of the town. And in front of the church, there's a marker. There's a stone marker. And it was from the year 2009, which commemorated 100 years ago when Reverend McLean began to serve that church. And on the monument, there was a picture of an angler, with a fish on, and, a beautiful quote. And at that moment, I thought of a Jewish tradition. When you go to visit a grave of a loved one, it's customary to take a small stone and place it on the grave, on the marker. And that's to indicate that you've been there and that you've visited. So I decided, I picked up a small pebble, and I put it right there on the monument to Reverend McLean, as a way of saying thank you to him for the way he taught all of us about fishing and religion and the millions of people that he had influenced, including a rabbi.
That's a beautiful story. That's a beautiful story. Wow, that's great. Well, thank you very much, Rabbi, for joining us tonight, and you have a great night. Thank you. Well, thank you, Erik, and thank you for joining us on another week of the Remote No Pressure podcast. Be sure to check us out on Facebook. Be sure to check us out on Instagram. But more than anything, join our mailing list. We got some exciting news coming out. I told you last week, be sure to go to the website, sign up for the mailing list at remotenopressure.com, because you're going to be the first to know what's about to happen. We're very excited. I'm building it up. Yes, I am building it up. Before, I would say I don't want to build things up. No, I'm building this up because I'm excited about it. This is huge. Huge. But anyways, and it's not fake news. Don't you hate that? Don't we get enough of that? Anyways, that's dumb. All right. Sorry, guys. I'm just excited. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be in my new place. Excited to have a great guest. Another great episode in the can. And I'm excited about what's to come. So go sign up for our mailing list. And until next time, go fishing.